you tired, worn out, burned out on religion? Listen, if you're doing it yourself, if it's just you and trying to make yourself, what did we read a while ago from Galatians that trying to make yourself acceptable to God, that no one can sustain a relationship with God that way. So Jesus says, are you tired, worn out, burned out on religion? I think if you took an honest poll through all the Christians in the world, you'd find out the majority would say, yes, as a matter of fact, I am. That's because, you know why? Because we've got the wrong idea. We think we're supposed to work for Him rather than working with Him, walking with Him. Are you tired, worn out, burned out on religion? Come to me. You see, this is the invitation, not to do something, but to have a relationship. Not to work, but to have a relationship. Now, that's not to say, of course, that we don't do things in our lives, but I'm talking spiritually. Come to me, Jesus says, get away with me, and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me, work with me, watch how I do it, learn the unforced rhythms of grace. You see, I'm talking to you today about living the life of grace. The life of grace means it's God working with us. And notice what He's saying here is, walk with me, work with me, watch how I do it, learn the unforced, listen to that, unforced rhythms of grace. Unforced means it's not phony, it's not artificial, it's not something you have to manufacture and drum it up or dream it up or put on a show. You're just walking with Jesus in your life. And did you know that I think that's what He wants more than anything else, is just to walk with us in our lives. Sometimes, back in the Middle Ages, they got the idea that if you become a Christian, you should pull out of the world and go sequester yourself in a monastery and spend all day chanting psalms and praying prayers. And this is one reason I love to read about Martin Luther, because he was raised that way. That's what he thought. He became a monk and sequestered himself in a monastery. But he got to know Jesus and found out that wasn't really what God had in mind at all. And he used to criticize that and say, listen, God doesn't want you off somewhere in a monastery. He used the example, I was just reading this last week, Martin Luther used the example of in the birth of Christ. When the shepherds announced the birth of Christ, the shepherds left their flocks and they came to see Jesus, and they came and they had an encounter with Jesus. But after they met Jesus in the manger, it says they returned. They returned to their flocks, rejoicing and praising God. They were touched by Jesus, but then they went back to their lives with the knowledge and the relationship that they had acquired with Jesus. And that's what Martin Luther pointed out, was that those shepherds, if they thought like they did in the Middle Ages, they would have, after meeting Christ, go away into a monastery and shave their heads and start chanting psalms all day. He said, I think God gets more pleasure out of us going back to our jobs and our work and our flocks or whatever with the knowledge of Him. Notice he says, walk with me, work with me, watch how I do it, learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I like what he says next. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. How about that? In my experience, in my Christian experience, I have felt like before, people trying to lay something heavy and ill-fitting on me. And I didn't like it very much, but, we're nice and we want to go along with everything. But Jesus says, I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting. You know what ill-fitting means? It means it doesn't fit. And did you know, here's the marvelous thing about God, that He knows you as an individual. And He knows what will fit you. And He has in mind a life for you that fits you, that suits you. I used to think, here's what I thought when I was growing up and I thought about Christianity. I thought, and somehow I got this idea in my mind, if a person becomes a Christian, what God is going to require them to do is to do something that is the most unlike what they're equipped to do. The most ill-fitting, thing that they would like least to do. Like for me, for instance, I thought, and I'd have this impression in my mind that if I became a Christian, He'll probably want me to become a missionary to some jungle somewhere where they live in a mud hut and eat worms and things that would, make me feel like terrible, things I feel I can't do it. I thought that's what God wants you to do, everything that you think is horrible. I found out just the opposite is true. He knew me so intimately and so well. He had an idea in mind that fit me perfectly, that was perfectly suited to me, like tailor-made, Jesus said here, I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Now, by the way, I thank God for people who go to faraway places and preach the gospel, and there are people like that. Mother Teresa, have you ever heard of her? The lady who she spent her whole life in India with the poor in India, ministering to them. And someone asked her one day, why did you do that? Why did you give your life staying here with these poor people in India and ministering to them? She said, because I wanted to. I wanted to do it. That was that was suited for her. And God's got in mind a plan for each one of us that suits us, that's tailor-made to fit us. And I base that on a scripture like this, that Jesus says, I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me and you'll learn how to live freely and lightly. Listen to that. All he's asking for us to do is keep company with him. Keep him involved in our everyday lives. Keep company with me and you'll learn how to live freely and lightly. You see, we don't just encounter Jesus on Sunday morning and then forget about him all the rest of the week. That's not much of a relationship anyway. If you just see somebody once a week for about an hour, he wants to walk with us. He's not just with us when we're having a Bible study. He's with us all the time. And we need him all the time, by the way. And he's walking with us, working with us, present with us all the time if we'll acknowledge it and be aware of his presence. Notice, though, that he says, keep company with me and you'll learn how to live freely and lightly. Now, how's that for a kind of a life? Free and light. Did you ever think that Jesus wants you to live freely and lightly? I believe he does. Now, most Christians I've known in my life, that doesn't really describe them. It's more like ponderous and heavy. But he doesn't say ponderous, heavy, and depressed. He says free and light. I think that's kind of an appealing picture for a Christian, to be free and light myself. Now, let's read one more verse. I don't think Jesus is looking for people to work for him. I think he wants people that he can walk with in their lives. I want to give you an illustration from Luke's Gospel, chapter 10. This is another one of my favorite passages. Luke chapter 10, verse 38. And the reason I like this is it illustrates, I believe, two ways of trying to live the Christian life. Two ways of living the Christian life. One is the life of grace, a life of faith, a life that's centered and focused on Jesus, free and light. The other is a life that's trying to do things, trying to work independent of him. And we'll see which one Jesus puts his seal of approval on. Luke chapter 10, verse 38. Now it came to pass, as they went, that he entered into a certain village, and a certain woman named Martha received him into her house. And she had a sister called Mary, which also sat at Jesus' feet and heard his word. So we've got the picture so far. We've got a woman named Martha who received Jesus into her house, and she had a sister also in the house named Mary, who sat at Jesus' feet and heard his word. So we've got two ladies, and Jesus is in the house. Mary, it says, sat at his feet and heard his word. Verse 40 says, but Martha was cumbered. The Amplified Translation says distracted. She was distracted about much serving, and came to him and said, Lord, dost thou not care that my sister hath left me to serve alone? Bid her therefore that she help me. And Jesus answered and said unto her, Martha, Martha, thou art careful and troubled. New English Bible says, fretting and fussing about many things, but one thing is needful. And Mary hath chosen that good part, which shall not be taken from her. Now, we've got two ladies in the house, and Jesus is in the house. So, two people. The thing that's fascinating to me about this passage is they're both in the presence of Jesus. Jesus is in the presence of both of them, but they're having different experiences. And the reason they're having different experiences is they have a different attitude about Jesus. One of them has an attitude that Jesus is somebody you work for and try to impress. And do you know, I think many Christians have that same attitude. That Jesus is somebody you work for and try to impress. Mary didn't see it that way. Mary saw Jesus as somebody you have a relationship with. Somebody I would say she's entered into a relationship of grace and put her faith in him. She's centering her attention on him. And she's not doing anything. All we read about Mary is that she sat at Jesus' feet and heard his word. Now again, I'm speaking about this in a spiritual way. I'm using this as an example. So when we spiritualize something, we're speaking of inward reality. I'm not saying that in our lives we should just sit down and cross our legs and think about Jesus. I'm saying that you can have that kind of relationship with Jesus all through your life. Whatever it is you're doing, you can have that kind of an attitude of trust and dependence upon Jesus. Martha, it says here, she was cumbered or distracted with much serving. And the result was, in verse 41, he says, Martha, Martha, thou art careful and troubled about many things,